The classroom was quiet except for the soft hum of the air system. Han Minji sat in the back row, her notebook open but mostly blank. She had been attending Professor Velthar's advanced xenopsychology class for 3 months now, but today felt different. The professor's crystal-like skin seemed to glow brighter than usual, which meant he was excited about something. "Today we discuss integration," Professor Velthar announced to the mixed group of students. His voice had that musical quality that all crystallines had when they spoke standard galactic. Specifically, human integration into our galactic society. Minji looked around the room. There were only 4 humans in the class of 30 students. The rest came from different worlds across the galaxy. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others breathed different gases and sat in special containers. A few looked almost human but had purple skin or extra eyes. Kang Daeho, sitting 2 seats away from Minji, raised his hand. He was always eager to participate. "Professor, humans have been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years now. Integration is going well, isn't it?" Professor Velthar's crystals dimmed slightly. This was never a good sign. That brings us to today's central question. He moved to the center of the room, his footsteps clicking on the metal floor. Why are humans considered the most dangerous species in the galaxy? The room became very quiet. Minji felt her stomach tighten. She had heard whispers about this topic before, but no professor had ever asked it so directly. A Vorthon student with blue tentacles spoke up. "Humans are not the strongest physically. The Garth are much stronger. Humans are not the smartest," added a Zephyrian with large black eyes. "The Eternal Archivists have better memory systems." "Humans cannot even fly naturally," said another alien student. "Many species have better natural abilities." Professor Velthar nodded at each comment. All true observations. Yet human military advisors are the most sought after in the galaxy. Human traitors are both welcomed and feared in equal measure. Human diplomats can end wars that have lasted for centuries, but they can also hold grudges that last just as long. He paused, looking directly at the human students. "So I ask again, why are humans dangerous?" Minji thought about her father. Nam Taewan had served in the border wars 20 years ago. He never talked much about the fighting, but sometimes she would find him staring out the window with a strange look in his eyes. When she asked what he was thinking about, he would always say, "Just remembering." Lim Soo-yun, the human teaching assistant, looked uncomfortable. He was usually calm and collected, but now he was fidgeting with his data pad. "Professor, perhaps dangerous is too strong a word? Is it?" Professor Velthar's crystals brightened again. "Let me share some data with you all." He waved his hand, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. This shows conflict patterns for various species over the last 1,000 years. The display showed different colored lines representing different alien species. Most of the lines showed the same pattern. A conflict would start, last for a few years, then end. After that, there would be peace for many generations before another conflict began. Most species follow natural cycles of conflict and resolution, the professor explained. They fight, they make peace, and then they forget. Their minds naturally let go of old anger. This is normal and healthy. He waved his hand again, and a new line appeared on the display. This one was red and looked very different from the others. Instead of smooth cycles, it showed many small conflicts, some big wars, and periods of tension that lasted for centuries. "This is the human pattern," Professor Velthar said. "Notice anything unusual?" Daeho raised his hand again. "Humans have more conflicts?" "No," said the professor. "Look closer. Humans have conflicts, yes, but they also have something else. They have memory. When most species make peace, they forget why they were fighting in the first place. Their children and grandchildren start fresh. But humans..." He paused dramatically. "Humans remember everything." Minji felt a chill run down her spine. She thought about the stories her father had told her about the border wars. Not just the battles, but the names of friends who had died, the places where important events had happened, even the small kindnesses that enemy soldiers had shown during temporary ceasefires. A student from the peaceful collective spoke up. His species was known for their ability to forgive and forget. But why is remembering dangerous? We thought memory was good for learning. Professor Velthar turned to look at the human students. Perhaps one of our human classmates would like to answer that question? All eyes turned to the 4 humans in the room. Soo-hyun looked down at his datapad. Daiho seemed frozen. The other, human student Park Jinsu, was clearly not going to volunteer. That left Minji. She took a deep breath and stood up slowly. Her heart was beating fast, but she knew she had to speak. This was important. Because we remember everything, she said quietly. Not just the facts, but the feelings too. The alien students looked confused. Professor Velthar nodded for her to continue. When your species make peace, you forget the pain. Minji continued, her voice getting stronger. You forget who betrayed whom. You forget who helped and who hurt. Your children grow up without carrying the weight of old anger or old debts. She looked around the room at all the alien faces watching her. But humans don't forget. We remember every kindness and every cruelty. We remember who stood by us and who turned against us. We remember the lessons from every mistake and every success. The Vorthon student waved his tentacles in what Minji had learned was confusion. But that sounds terrible. Why would you want to carry such burdens? Minji thought about her father again. About the nights when he would sit quietly, lost in memories. About the way he would always help veterans from other wars, even ones that happened before he was born. About how he taught her to learn from history so she wouldn't repeat the mistakes of the past. Because someone has to remember, she said finally. Someone has to carry the lessons forward. Someone has to make sure that the people who died for something important are not forgotten. Someone has to remember both the good and the bad, so we can do better next time. The room was completely silent now. Even Professor Velthar seemed surprised by her answer. My father fought in the border wars, Minji continued. He still remembers the names of everyone who died in his unit. He remembers which enemy commanders showed mercy and which ones didn't. He remembers not just to hold grudges, but to learn, to understand, to make sure that if there's ever another war, we do it better. She sat down, her hands shaking slightly. The classroom remained quiet for a long moment. Finally, Professor Velthar spoke. Miss Han, would you be willing to research this topic further? I believe your perspective could be valuable for the entire class. Minji nodded, though she wasn't sure what she was agreeing to. Excellent, the professor said. Next week you will present your findings on human memory and its implications for galactic society. As the class ended and students began to file out, Minji realized that her simple answer had started something much bigger than she had expected. She just wasn't sure yet what that something would be. Minji stared at the massive wall of data screens in the university library. She had been here for 6 hours and her eyes hurt from all the reading. The research was much harder than she had expected. Still here? A voice asked behind her. She turned to see Park Jin-young, the head librarian. He was an older human with gray hair and kind eyes. Everyone on the station knew him because he seemed to know everything about everyone. I'm trying to understand something, Minji said, rubbing her tired eyes. Professor Velthar asked me to research human memory, but the more I read, the more confused I get. Jin-young pulled up a chair next to her. What's confusing you? Look at this. Minji pointed to one of the screens. This shows the history of the Zephyrian Empire. They had a big war with the Crystalline Federation 300 years ago. Millions died. It lasted 50 years. I know about that war, Jin-young said. What's the problem? They have almost no records of it, Minji said, frustration clear in her voice. Just basic facts. Who won, who lost, when it ended. But there are no personal stories, no details about what actually happened, no records of individual battles or heroes or mistakes. She switched to another screen. Now look at human records from the same time period. We weren't even involved in any major wars then, but we have detailed records of every small conflict on Earth. We know the names of individual soldiers. We have their letters home. We have battle plans and personal diaries and even grocery lists from people who lived through minor skirmishes. Jin Young nodded slowly. And this surprises you? It amazes me, Minji said, but it also scares me. Why do we remember so much when everyone else forgets? Have you considered, Jin Young said carefully, that maybe other species don't forget by accident? Minji looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Jin Young glanced around the library, making sure no one else was listening. Then he leaned closer. I've been the librarian here for 30 years. I've seen the records from many different species. Most of them have something called memory cleansing rituals. Memory cleansing? After major conflicts or traumatic events, they perform ceremonies designed to help their entire society forget the painful details. They keep basic historical facts for reference, but they deliberately let go of the emotional memories, the personal pain, the anger, the desire for revenge. Minji felt a cold sensation in her stomach. They choose to forget? They see it as healing, Jin Young explained. Think about it. If you could forget every painful thing that ever happened to you, wouldn't that make life easier? Minji thought. About her father again. She remembered asking him once why he kept his old military gear in a box in the closet if it made him sad. He had said, because forgetting dishonors the people who aren't here to remember for themselves. Can I see these records? She asked. Jin Young hesitated. Some of them are restricted, but I think your research project gives us enough reason. He stood up and walked to a special terminal that required his handprint to access. Just remember, this information is sensitive. Other species might not appreciate us studying their memory practices. The new records that appeared on Minji's screen were shocking. Species after species had developed elaborate systems for forgetting traumatic events. The peaceful collective had meditation techniques that erased painful memories. The Vorthon used chemical treatments to fade emotional connections to past events. Even the warlike Garth had rituals where they symbolically buried their anger along with their dead. This is incredible, Minji whispered. They've all found ways to let go of the past. Keep reading, Jin Young said. It gets more interesting. Minji found records of diplomatic meetings where human representatives had shocked other species by remembering conflicts that happened generations ago. There were trade disputes where humans had referenced agreements made by great-great-grandparents. There were peace negotiations where humans had brought up favors and betrayals from centuries past. But there was something else in the records, something that made Minji's heart race. Look at this, she said, pointing to a report from a human diplomat. Ambassador Chen writes that the Zephyrians were about to make the same mistake they made in their war with the Crystallines 300 years ago, but they had no memory of that war beyond basic facts. The human diplomatic team had to explain their own history to them. And the Zephyrians changed their strategy based on human memories of their own past. They avoided a war that would have killed millions. Minji kept reading. Story after story of humans helping other species by remembering things those species had forgotten. Military advisors who prevented repeated tactical errors. Traders who honored old agreements that had been forgotten. Diplomats who reminded species of ancient friendships that had been lost to memory cleansing. We are not just dangerous because we remember, Minji said slowly. We're valuable because we remember. Now you're getting it, Jin Young said with a smile. But Minji wasn't finished. She spent the next 3 hours digging deeper into human records. What she found made her understand something profound about her own species. Humans didn't just remember the bad things. They remembered everything. She found records of human soldiers who had risked their lives to save enemy wounded. She found stories of human traders who had continued to honor contracts even when the other party had forgotten about them. She found accounts of human families who had maintained friendships with alien families across centuries, even when those aliens had no memory of why the friendship started. We remember kindness too, she said to Jin Young. Not just grudges and pain. We remember every act of mercy, every moment of friendship, every small gesture of help. That's the part that really makes other species nervous, Jin Young said. They understand holding grudges. That makes sense to them even if they choose not to do it. But remembering kindness? feeling obligated to return favors from generations ago. That confuses them. Minji's roommate, Choi Heron, found her in the library just before closing time. Heron was studying interspecies diplomacy and had heard about Minji's research project. "You look terrible," Heron said, sitting down next to her. "How long have you been here?" "All day," Minji admitted. "But I think I'm starting to understand something important." She explained what she had learned about memory cleansing and how humans were different. Heron listened carefully, asking questions and helping Minji organize her thoughts. "So you're saying that humans are the only species that carries full emotional memory across generations?" Heron asked. "As far as I can tell, yes," Minji said. "Everyone else has found ways to let go of the past. We're the only ones who insist on carrying it all forward." "But why?" Heron asked. "What makes us different?" That night, Minji went to visit her father. She found him in his small apartment reading an old book. When she walked in, she noticed the box of his military things was open on the table. "Dad," she said, sitting down across from him, "can I ask you about the war?" Her father looked surprised. She had never asked directly before. "What do you want to know? Why do you keep all this stuff? Why do you remember everything when it obviously hurts?" Her father was quiet for a long time. Then he reached into the box and pulled out a small metal object. It was a communicator, but it looked different from modern ones. "This belonged to a Zephyrian soldier named Keltar," he said. "During the Third Battle of Kepler-7, my unit was trapped behind enemy lines. We were wounded and out of supplies." He turned the communicator over in his hands. "Keltar found us. He could have captured us or killed us. Instead, he gave us food and medical supplies. He even helped us reach the evacuation point." "Why are you telling me this?" Minji asked. "Because 3 years later, Keltar's unit was trapped the same way, and because I remembered his kindness, I was able to convince my commander to rescue them instead of leaving them to die." Her father put the communicator back in the box. "Keltar died in that rescue, but his family survived the war because he had shown mercy to enemies 3 years earlier." Minji felt tears in her eyes. "That's why we remember. That's why we remember," her father agreed. "Not just the pain, but the kindness. Not just the mistakes, but the lessons. Not just the deaths, but the reasons they mattered." Walking back to her dorm that night, Minji realized she had found her answer. Humans were dangerous not because they were violent or cruel, but because they carried the full weight of history forward. They remembered everything: the good and the bad, the kindness and the cruelty, the victories and the defeats, and in a galaxy where everyone else chose to forget, that made humans the keepers of everyone's true history. The question now was what she was going to do with that knowledge. The grand auditorium was much bigger than Minji had expected. What was supposed to be a simple class presentation had turned into something much more important. Word had spread across the university station about her research, and now there were people here she had never seen before. Professor Velthar stood at the podium, his crystals glowing bright blue with excitement. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, today we have something special. Miss Han Minji will present her research on human memory and its implications for galactic society." Minji walked up to the stage on shaky legs. She had practiced her presentation dozens of times, but looking out at the audience made her nervous. There were professors from other departments, diplomats from various species, and even some people attending by hologram from other worlds. In the front row, she saw Dr. An Sung-min, the head of the Human Studies Department. He gave her an encouraging nod. A few rows back, she spotted Lee Yoonji, a student journalist who had been asking people questions all week about the presentation. "Thank you for coming," Minji began, her voice shaking slightly. "A week ago, Professor Velthar asked why humans are considered dangerous. Today I want to show you that the answer is both simpler and more complicated than anyone might think." She activated the holographic display, and images began appearing in the air above the stage. The first image showed a timeline of galactic conflicts over the past 1,000 years. "Most species in our galaxy follow predictable patterns," she said, pointing to the display. "They have conflicts, They resolve them, and then they forget. Their societies naturally heal by letting go of painful memories. The timeline showed the same pattern she had seen in the library. Smooth cycles of conflict and peace for most alien species, with long periods of calm between wars. But humans are different, she continued, and the red line representing human conflicts appeared on the display. We remember everything. A Vorthon professor in the audience raised his tentacles. Miss Han, we already know this. The question is why this makes humans dangerous. Minji had expected this question. With respect, sir, I think we're asking the wrong question. Instead of asking why human memory makes us dangerous, we should ask what happens to a galaxy where only one species remembers. She changed the display to show 3 specific examples she had prepared. Let me tell you 3 stories, she said, her confidence growing. First, the story of the Shadow Wars. The display showed images of the Shade Empire, a species known for their dark technology and secretive nature. 400 years ago, the Shades made an agreement with the Crystalline Federation. The Shades would provide energy technology in exchange for protection from their enemies. But when the Crystallines needed help the most, the Shades broke their promise and disappeared. Minji looked around the audience. The Crystallines suffered terribly because of this betrayal. Millions died. But 50 years later, the Crystallines had forgotten the details of the betrayal. All they remembered was that they had once worked with the Shades. The display changed to show more recent events. 2 centuries later, the Crystallines were about to make the same agreement with the Shades again. They had forgotten the lessons of the past. But humans remembered, she continued. Human diplomatic records contained detailed accounts of the original betrayal. When human advisors warned the Crystallines about what had happened before, the Crystallines were shocked they had no memory of the details. A murmur went through the audience. Many of the alien attendees looked uncomfortable. The Crystallines chose not to make the new agreement. They avoided repeating a mistake that would have cost millions of lives, but they could only avoid it because humans remembered their own history for them. Minji moved to her second story. Now let me tell you about the Mercy of Kepler Station. The display showed images of a small space station in a remote system. During the Frontier Wars 2 centuries ago, this station was attacked by raiders. Everyone expected it to be destroyed, but the attacking force was led by a commander named Velkoth of the Garth Confederacy. Velkoth had been saved as a child by human peacekeepers during a different conflict. The humans who saved him were killed in that same conflict, but not before they made sure Velkoth reached safety. Minji's voice grew stronger. Velkoth remembered this kindness. When he realized humans lived on Kepler Station, he called off the attack. He said he could not harm the people who belonged to the same species that had saved his life. The audience was very quiet now. The Garth have no memory of this event, Minji continued. Their memory-cleansing rituals erased the emotional connections to the Frontier Wars decades ago. But humans remember. We remember Velkoth's name, and the names of the peacekeepers who saved him, and the exact date when mercy was shown to enemies. She moved to her final story. Last, let me tell you about the Battle of New Terra. The display showed a more recent conflict from 50 years ago. This was during humanity's first major war after joining the galactic community. Human forces were badly outnumbered by a coalition of species who didn't trust the newcomers. Humans were losing badly. Their fleet was surrounded and their ground forces were trapped. It looked like humanity's brief membership in galactic society was about to end in disaster. Minji paused for effect. But then something unexpected happened. A Zephyrian admiral named Tolvek broke from the coalition fleet and came to help the humans. The audience leaned forward, interested despite themselves. Why did Tolvek help? Minji asked. Because 60 years earlier, during the Zephyrian civil wars, human merchant ships had continued to bring food and medicine to Zephyrian colonies, even when it was dangerous. The humans honored their trade contracts even when they didn't have to. The Zephyrians had forgotten this kindness. Their memory cleansing had erased the details of who had helped them during their civil war. But Admiral Tolvek's grandfather had kept private records. When the old admiral learned that humans were in trouble, he ordered his grandson to repay the debt. The display showed the dramatic rescue of the human fleet. The human admiral was so surprised by the rescue that he asked Tolvek why he had helped. When Tolvek explained, the human admiral broke down crying. He said no one had ever remembered human kindness for so long. Minji looked around the auditorium. Many of the alien faces looked thoughtful now. "You see," she said, "human memory works both ways. Yes, we remember every betrayal and every cruelty, but we also remember every kindness and every act of mercy. We remember debts of gratitude that span centuries. We remember friendships that outlast the people who made them." A crystalline professor stood up. "But Miss Han, doesn't this create an unfair advantage? If only humans remember, then only humans can benefit from this long-term thinking." "That's exactly the problem," Minji said, "and it's why I think we need to change how we think about human memory." She activated a new display that showed a proposed structure. "I call this the memory compact. Instead of seeing human memory as dangerous or unfair, what if we made it a service to the entire galaxy?" "What do you mean?" asked Dr. An from the front row. "Humans could serve as the official memory keepers for galactic society," Minji explained. "We would maintain detailed records not just of our own history, but of everyone's history. We would remember the debts and the kindnesses, the lessons and the mistakes, the promises and the betrayals." The audience began talking among themselves. Some seemed excited by the idea, others worried. "But we wouldn't use this knowledge for our own benefit," Minji continued, raising her voice to regain attention. "We would use it to help all species learn from their past, to avoid repeating mistakes, to honor old friendships, to prevent the same conflicts from happening over and over again." A hologram flickered to life at the back of the auditorium. It showed Ambassador Yoon Chang-ho, one of humanity's senior representatives to the Galactic Council. He must have been watching the presentation from his office. "Miss Han," the ambassador said, "what you're proposing would make humans responsible for everyone's memory. That's an enormous burden. Are you sure our species is ready for that responsibility?" Minji thought about her father and his box of memories. About the Zephyrian communicator he kept to remember an enemy's kindness. About all the human families who maintained friendships across generations with people who had forgotten why those friendships mattered. "Ambassador," she said, "I think we're already carrying that burden. The question is whether we'll carry it alone, or whether we'll share it with everyone else." The auditorium erupted in discussion. Aliens were talking excitedly in their own languages. Professors were arguing with each other. Diplomats were sending urgent messages to their homeworlds. Professor Velthar stood up and called for quiet. When the noise died down, he looked at Minji with what she thought might be respect. "Miss Han," he said, "I think you've started something much bigger than a class presentation." As Minji looked out at the audience, she realized he was right. Her simple answer about human memory had grown into something that could change how the entire galaxy thought about the past, the present, and the future. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for what came next. 2 weeks after Minji's presentation, the galaxy was talking about human memory in ways that made her stomach hurt with worry. The first sign of trouble came from Captain Go Ji-hwan, who ran a human merchant ship between the core worlds and the frontier colonies. He sent a message to the university that Professor Velthar shared with the class. "Docking fees have doubled at 3 different stations," Captain Go's message said. "Station masters are nervous about letting humans dock for extended periods. They're worried we might be gathering intelligence or building grudges against them." The second sign came from Shinarium, a diplomatic corps officer working on Zephyr Prime. Her report was more troubling. "Zephyrian officials are requesting that all human diplomatic staff undergo memory limitation therapy," she wrote. "They want us to forget sensitive information after each negotiation ends. When we refused, they threatened to expel our entire embassy." But the worst news came from the mixed colonies where humans and aliens lived together. Ro Kyung-soo, a human colonist on New Harmony, sent desperate messages describing increasing tension. "My Vorthan neighbors won't talk to us anymore," his message said. "They're scared that our family is keeping records of every small disagreement we've ever had. Yesterday, someone painted memory hoarders on our front door." Minji sat in her Dorm room. Reading message after message from humans across the galaxy. Her presentation had made people think about human memory, but not in the way she had hoped. Instead of seeing memory as a gift, many alien species were starting to see it as a threat. "This is my fault," she said to her roommate Hyarin, who was trying to help her organize the flood of incoming reports. "No, it's not," Hyarin said firmly. "You told the truth. It's not your fault that some people don't like the truth." But not all the news was bad. Mixed in with the worried messages were other reports that gave Minji hope. Dr. Kelvor of the Eternal Archivists had requested an urgent meeting with human historians. The Eternal Archivists were famous for their vast libraries, but they had a problem. They were so focused on collecting information that they often forgot why certain information was important. "We need help understanding our own collections," Dr. Kelvor's message explained. "We have records of thousands of conflicts and agreements, but we don't remember the emotional context that made them significant. We think human memory could help us serve our purpose better." Young aliens across several worlds were secretly studying human history through underground networks. They called themselves Rememberers and were fascinated by the idea of learning from the past instead of forgetting it. Most surprising of all, the Council of Weeping Mothers had sent a formal request for human assistance. The Weeping Mothers represented families who had lost children to war across dozens of species. Their message was heartbreaking. "Every generation our children die in the same wars," their message said. "We fight the same battles, make the same mistakes, lose the same lives. If humans can help us remember why these wars started, maybe we can finally stop them." Professor Velthar called Minji to his office 3 days after the reports started coming in. She expected him to be angry or worried, but instead, he seemed excited. "The Galactic Council has called an emergency session," he told her. "They want to discuss what they're calling the human memory question." "Are they going to ban humans from keeping records?" Minji asked, fearing the worst. "I don't think so," the professor said. "But they want to understand what your presentation really means for the future of galactic society." He leaned forward in his chair. "They've requested that you testify before the full council." Minji felt the blood drain from her face. "Me? But I'm just a student. I don't know anything about politics or diplomacy." "You know about human memory," Professor Velthar said. "And right now that makes you one of the most important people in the galaxy." The news that Minji would testify before the Galactic Council spread quickly. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to her. Reporters called constantly. Other students asked for interviews. Even her parents called from Earth, worried and proud at the same time. But the most important call came from Fleet Admiral Kim Young-ho, the senior human military representative to the council. "Miss Han," the admiral said over video link, "I've read your research and I've seen the reports from across the galaxy. I think you've uncovered something that could change everything." "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Minji said. "You didn't cause trouble," Admiral Kim replied. "You revealed trouble that was already there. The question is what we do about it." He leaned forward on the screen. "I want to share something with you that might help with your testimony. Something that's been classified until now." The admiral's expression became serious. "Over the past 50 years, human military advisors have prevented 23 potential conflicts by recognizing historical patterns that other species had forgotten. We've helped end 14 wars by reminding the participants of successful peace agreements from their own past. But we've never talked about it publicly," he continued, "because we were afraid other species would see it as manipulation." Minji thought about this for a moment. "But it wasn't manipulation, was it? You were helping them remember their own history." "Exactly," Admiral Kim said, "and that's what I think you should tell the council. Human memory isn't a weapon. It's a tool that the entire galaxy could benefit from." Dr. Bei Jisoo, a human xenopsychologist, also reached out to help with Minji's testimony. She explained the scientific reasons why humans remember differently from other species. "It's in our brain structure," Dr. Bei explained during their meeting. "Most species have natural mechanisms that fade traumatic or emotionally intense memories over time. It's a survival trait that helps them move forward after difficult experiences." But humans don't have these mechanisms? Minji asked. We have them, but they're much weaker, Dr. Bay said. We evolved on a world where remembering danger was more important than forgetting pain. So we developed brains that hold onto memories much longer and in much more detail. This gave Minji an idea. If human memory was a natural trait, not a choice, then maybe other species would understand it better. The week before her testimony, Minji received an unexpected visitor. Velthar, her professor's cousin, came to the university. Unlike Professor Velthar, this Velthar was a member of the Galactic Council. I wanted to speak with you before the hearing, Counselor Velthar said. His crystals were dim, which usually meant concern. Some members of the council are frightened by what you've revealed about human memory. Why? Minji asked. Because it makes them question their own choice to forget, he said. For thousands of years, our species have believed that forgetting pain is the path to wisdom. You're suggesting that remembering pain might be wiser. Minji thought about her father again, about the weight he carried, but also about the good he had done because of that weight. I'm not saying forgetting is wrong, she said carefully. I'm saying that someone should remember, and if humans are the only ones who can do it naturally, maybe that's our purpose. Counselor Velthar's crystals brightened slightly. That's a good answer. Hold on to that thought. On the night before her testimony, Minji couldn't sleep. She walked around the university station, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. In the observation deck, she found Lee Yunji, the student journalist who had been covering her story. Nervous? Yunji asked. Terrified, Minji admitted. Good, Yunji said. That means you understand how important this is. They stood together, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was preparing to decide what to do about human memory. The decision would affect not just humans, but every species in the galaxy. What do you think will happen? Minji asked. I think, Yunji said, that tomorrow you're going to remind the galaxy why memory matters. And I think they're going to listen. As Minji walked back to her dorm, she carried with her the weight of her species' unique gift, and the hope that she could help others understand that some burdens are worth carrying. The Galactic Council chambers on Luna City were bigger than anything Minji had ever seen. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds filled the massive space, all there to hear what she had to say about human memory. Council Speaker Velmore stood at the central podium, his crystalline form reflecting the lights of the chamber. He was Professor Velthar's uncle and one of the most respected leaders in the galaxy. We gather today, Speaker Velmore announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, to address what may be the most important question facing our galactic society. What do we do about human memory? Minji sat in a small section reserved for witnesses, flanked by Fleet Admiral Kim Young-ho and Dr. Bae Ji-soo. Across the chamber, she could see delegations from dozens of species, all watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern to fear. Before we begin testimony, the speaker continued, let us acknowledge the scope of this issue. In the 2 weeks since Ms. Han Minji's research became public, we have received formal complaints from 17 species, requests for assistance from 12 others, and reports of civil unrest on 43 mixed colonies. A murmur ran through the chamber. Minji had known her presentation had caused problems, but she hadn't realized the scale. However, the speaker added, we have also received unprecedented requests for human assistance in conflict resolution, historical analysis, and diplomatic mediation. It appears that human memory is both our greatest concern and our most valuable resource. The first to testify were the concerned species. A Vorthon diplomat stood and spoke in their flowing musical language before the translation came through. The Vorthon Collective believes that human memory poses a threat to galactic peace, the translation said. How can we trust a species that remembers every slight, every betrayal, every moment of weakness? How can we negotiate with beings who will hold our mistakes against us for centuries? Similar concerns came from other species. The peaceful collective worried about humans disrupting their natural healing processes. The Zephyrian Empire questioned whether humans were using their Memory is a form of psychological warfare. Then Admiral Kim stood to respond. His voice was steady and strong. Honored beings, he said, I understand your concerns, but let me share some facts that may surprise you. He activated a holographic display that showed data from the past 50 years. Since humans joined the galactic community, the number of major conflicts has decreased by 37%. The average duration of wars has decreased by 48%. The number of repeated conflicts, wars fought for the same reasons as previous wars, has decreased by 62%. The chamber became very quiet. This is not because humans are preventing wars through force, Admiral Kim continued. It is because human advisors are helping species recognize patterns they have forgotten. We remember which diplomatic strategies worked in the past. We remember which peace agreements lasted and which ones failed. We remember the warning signs that lead to war. A Garth representative stood up. But you also remember our defeats, our embarrassments, our moments of weakness. Admiral Kim nodded. Yes, we do. But we also remember your victories, your moments of honor, your acts of courage and kindness. He paused. The question is, which memories do you want us to act upon? Dr. Bae Jisoo spoke next, explaining the science behind human memory. She showed brain scans that demonstrated the neurological differences between humans and other species. Humans did not choose to remember everything, she explained. We evolved this way. On our homeworld, the species that survived were the ones that could learn from every experience and pass those lessons to their children. But, she continued, we can choose what to do with our memories. We can use them to hold grudges, or we can use them to build understanding. We can use them to plan revenge, or we can use them to prevent future suffering. Then came the most powerful testimony of all. The Council of Weeping Mothers had sent representatives from 12 different species, all parents who had lost children to war. Their spokesperson was an elderly being from the ethereal collective named Mother Silvani. Her species was known for their wisdom and compassion, but her voice carried a pain that transcended species boundaries. Honored Council, she began, I have lost 3 sons to war. My grandmother lost 2 sons to war. My great-grandmother lost 4 sons to war. She paused, and the chamber was completely silent. Each time we told ourselves that this war would be the last. Each time we believed we had learned from our mistakes. Each time we were wrong. Mother Silvani turned to look directly at Minji. But we had not learned, had we? We had forgotten. We had deliberately chosen to forget the pain, the mistakes, the warning signs. And so our children died in the same wars, making the same errors for the same foolish reasons. Tears ran down her ethereal features. If the humans can remember what we have forgotten, if they can help us break these cycles of death, then I beg you, let them remember. Let them carry our pain so our children do not have to die for it. One by one, other weeping mothers stood and shared similar stories. War after war, generation after generation, the same tragedies repeated because the lessons had been forgotten. Finally, it was Minji's turn to speak. She walked to the witness podium on shaking legs, looking out at thousands of alien faces all waiting to hear what she had to say. Honored beings, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Then she cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. I am not a diplomat or a politician or a military leader. I am just a student who asked a question and discovered an answer that surprised me. She took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, my professor asked why humans are dangerous. I said it was because we remember, but I was wrong. A murmur ran through the chamber. This was not what anyone had expected. Humans are not dangerous because we remember. Minji continued, her voice growing stronger. Humans are dangerous because we remember alone. She activated her own display, showing the research she had prepared for this moment. Every species in this chamber has forgotten important lessons from their past. Not by accident, but by choice. You have chosen to let go of pain, trauma, and conflict. And this is not wrong. It is healthy and natural. But someone has to remember. Someone has to carry the lessons forward. Someone has to make sure that the sacrifices of the past have meaning for the future. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many beings as possible. I propose the memory compact, she said. Humans will serve as the official memory keepers for galactic society. We will remember not just our own history but everyone's history. We will carry the burden of painful memories so that you don't have to. But we will not do this alone, and we will not do this in secret. Everything we remember will be shared. Every lesson we preserve will be available to all. We will be the galaxy's memory, but it will be everyone's memory to use. The chamber erupted in discussion. Beings were talking excitedly in dozens of languages. Some seemed excited, others worried, many confused. Speaker Velmore called for order. When quiet returned, he looked at Minji with what she hoped was approval. "Miss Han," he said, "you are proposing that humans take responsibility for preserving the entire galaxy's emotional and historical memory. That is an enormous burden. Why would your species accept such responsibility?" Minji thought about her father, about his box of memories, about the weight he carried and the good he had done because of it. "Because," she said simply, "someone has to remember, and we're the only ones who can." The vote took place 3 hours later. After much debate, discussion, and consultation with homeworlds, the Council reached its decision. The Memory Compact was approved by a margin of 73%. Humans would become the official memory keepers for galactic civilization. They would maintain detailed records of conflicts, agreements, kindnesses, betrayals, victories, and defeats for all species. In return, other species would share their natural ability to heal and move forward, teaching humans how to carry memory, without being crushed by it. Minji was offered the position of First Remembrancer, a new diplomatic role that would coordinate the galaxy's memory-keeping efforts. 6 months later, Minji stood in the Memorial Garden on Luna City. It was a new place, created to honor the memories that the galaxy had decided to preserve. There were monuments to forgotten heroes, memorials to repeated tragedies that would not be repeated again, and markers for acts of kindness that had been lost to time. She was placing a small stone at the base of a memorial for Keltar, the Zephyrian soldier who had shown mercy to her father during the border wars. Beside his name were the names of thousands of others who had chosen kindness over cruelty, mercy over revenge, understanding over hatred. "Miss Han?" a voice asked behind her. She turned to see a young Vorthon student, probably no older than she had been when this all started. "I'm Kilthera," the student said. "I'm studying at the university. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For helping us remember," the young Vorthon said. "My grandfather died in the Fourth Trade War. I never knew why that war started or what it was about. My people had forgotten." The student's tentacles moved in what Minji had learned was a gesture of respect. "But the human memory keepers helped me understand. They showed me records of my grandfather's service, his sacrifice,